I, as many kids do, asked my parents if they loved me when I was young, and of course they said yes, and I believed them. And that's continued to be the case, but it's been really interesting to see how that is not necessarily the case for all children that I see, or how sometimes that love is very conditional, or how someone could love their child but still not believe in their child's ability to make their own decisions. So I decided to test the love of my parents when I was pretty young. I came to them when I was 12, and this is me, when I said that I didn't want to go to school. And as you might imagine, they sort of scoffed at this and laughed and said, well, that's kind of silly, like, who wants to go to school in 5th grade? No one loves doing math minutes and like learning, state capitals and things that we'll never ever use again. But I was serious, and my parents fortunately took me serious, and they said, hey, it's your life. The process of becoming an adult is learning how to make your own decisions, and you might as well start now. If you leave school and you want to go back, it's going to be there. This is not an irreversible decision. The consequences are really not very high. And so I did. And while they spent many sleepless nights wondering about whether or not I would succeed outside of school or just move home and smoke pot in my parents' basement and do Jell-O shots, they believed in me enough to allow me to make my own decisions, and that was really, really huge. So I did something called unschooling, which is a self-directed kind of homeschooling. While my peers sat in school, I was out finding mentors and building businesses and doing internships and doing things that I never would have been able to do had I been in the classroom. So unschooling didn't have teachers, it didn't have grades, it didn't have tests. My schedule wasn't governed by a system of bells. Instead, I was able to learn how, when, and where I wanted. I do want to make one small distinction between homeschooling and unschooling. Unschooling is something that is initiated by the student. It's done not to limit someone's worldview. My parents weren't trying to stop me from learning biology or sex ed or something like that. Unschooling was about giving me opportunities to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do had I been locked inside a classroom. So I was able to do things like work on political campaigns, I organized collaborative learning groups, I helped build a library in my hometown, I crashed conferences in Silicon Valley, I got a job at a startup that kind of ironically helps people get into college. I lived in France for 6 months. And so all of these experiences made me very content with myself because I was used to defending my choice to leave school. I mean, I don't think a day of my life has gone by where someone hasn't said, what if you'd stayed in school? Do you regret that? What have you missed out on? Don't you miss the friends or the social experience? And so I became very, very adept and comfortable with being myself, both in terms of being a dropout, but also in other ways. And I was getting towards 18 and graduating and graduating and going off to college and looking at my other friends around me. And I saw people who were going through the same process of figuring out how they were different, how they were individuals, but they were having a really hard time being themselves. They felt judged by society, they felt judged by their peers, but most of all, they felt judged by their parents. And it was amazing to see that these are good parents who care about their children, who want them to be successful, but still couldn't detach their expectations from the beliefs and lives of their kids. So I went to college, I left college, and I run an organization now called uncollege.org, and we provide resources for people who want to learn outside of school. We run a gap year program, and again we encounter people who come to us for whom we are their first community, the first community of people that they find who share common values. They've been shunned by their social group, they've been rejected by their parents. I mean, it's amazing to see how these bright, beautiful people have been totally ignored by the people around them who I think should care about them. And as I was saying, the process of becoming an adult really requires understanding that you have agency, that you have the power to make your own decisions. And that can start at a very small scale of being a kid and being allowed to order whatever you want on the restaurant menu instead of having your parents do that for you. And it only grows from there. But it's a process that's really hard to do if you don't have parents who believe in your ability to make your own decisions. One thing that's been really interesting is that we've worked with a lot of people and found a lot of people through Uncollege who are misfits in other ways for being dropouts. For example, there are a lot of people who are part of the Uncollege community who are queer in some way. And it's interesting that we find people who are totally out to their parents, whose parents have no problem with them being gay, but are afraid to tell their parents that they want to drop out of school. And it's crazy to think that this would not have been the case 20 years ago, but the cultural expectations have changed to an extent that it's okay to be gay, but it's not okay to drop out of school. I posit that you should in the same way that you would love your child if they told you that they were gay, you should love your child if they don't want to go to school. One thing that's really interesting about living in San Francisco is that I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are wonder children, who went off to college early and graduated with PhDs when they were 12 and things like this. Seriously. There's a lot of these people, but the thing that amazes me is that in many cases, these are people whose parents have directly said to me that they don't believe in their children's ability to make their own decisions. These are smart, capable individuals who've been living independently for years. And it's amazing to see that there are parents who still do not believe in their children's ability to make their own decisions. In the Gap Year program, we're continually interacting with people as we ramp up to start this fall, and there are parents who are curious about what the expectations for the year are. And parents couch this in terms of concern. They're concerned about their children. They're concerned about where they're living. But I think it's really about control. It's about parents who want to live vicariously through their children. I hear stories of parents who really want to live vicariously through their children. And I think that if you want to go to medical school, you should go to medical school, not your child. If you want to get a dog, you should get a dog. Don't force your child to get a dog. If you're unhappy with your marriage, end it. Don't force your child to break up with her boyfriend or girlfriend. These are serious examples, and I've seen parents do things like these and like this. And while it sounds ridiculous, we've gotten into this complex where parents have so much control and children are so sheltered that they don't know what to do when they first go out to live on their own. I was very fortunate that when I started entering adolescence, one of my grandparents bought my mom a plaque that said very clearly, "Your children are not you." And this still hangs in my parents' room. And I think I'm so grateful that my parents understood this and took this to heart and realized that I am not them, that I have different expectations, that I'm going to lead a different life than they did. My challenge to parents is this: to love your children, really. Not to love them conditionally or only to love them if they make choices that you support. One thing that my mom said that really resonated, and I wanted to share, was that to not let your own fears hold back your child if they have the courage to try something new. The only question you should have in mind is your child happy? And if the answer is no, to stop and think. And maybe the child is happy, and maybe maybe the person who's actually unhappy is you. And it might be time to change, to stop and think about your own expectations and how they align with what your child is doing. My challenge to children is to find emotional support outside of your parents. Your parents are there to love and support you, but it is your life, and you shouldn't give a damn what they think. You should figure out how to make your own decisions, how to evaluate situations, how to take your own risks without always relying on your parents. I was talking to a friend about this, and she said, "I have 4 moms." And at first I laughed, of course, and I was like, "What do you mean you have 4 moms? That's biologically you have 4 moms? I'm very confused." But I realized that she was serious, and that I thought about my own life and the people who've been parental figures to me, and realized that the same is true for me. And I came up with a rule of thumb, which is that for every 10 years of your life, the number of moms you have should double. So by the time you're 10, you should have 2. And by the time you're 20, you should have 4. By the time you're 30, you should have 8. And I think that this should be true throughout your life. Everyone can use more moms. Everyone can use more emotional support from people who are there to support and care about you. With love and time, you'll figure out what it means to be an adult, to make your own decisions. But I caution you to not wait too long to start making your own decisions. And this goes for everyone, from 15 to 50. I know people who are 50 who are still beholden to their 80-year-old parents, and are still asking them for advice on what they should buy at the grocery store. That's ridiculous. You need to grow up at some point. Life is far too short to be brought down by anyone else's ideas for your life, even if they happen to share a last name. Thank you.